Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking about a new book on NgRx called the NgRx Book. Looking forward to it. So let's say hi to our panelists, then we'll meet our guest, and then we'll get into the content. Joining us today, we have Mike. Mike, what's going on?
Not too much, just hanging out on another Friday.
Nice. I'm glad you're hanging out with us. So that's always good. Alyssa, what's going on?
I'm so excited, first of all, to meet Nils and have him on the show today. And I totally just spoiled that one again.
We're like not even going to worry about that anymore. We're good. We're good.
Thank you, beautiful man.
But we do have a new rule. Like if you do name the guest before we get to the guest, you're the one that gets to introduce them. So
yes.
There you go.
I would like to welcome to the stage the very kind and most wonderful Nils, who is above me.
Oh, I'm above you. Yeah, thanks for spoiling me. Thanks for the nice introduction there, Alyssa. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Such a nice show. Such lovely people here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. Hey, so do you want to maybe tell our viewers a bit about yourself? Those that might not know you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Nils, freelance software engineer. Like I'm doing a couple of different stuff. Like on the software engineering part, I'm working with TypeScript, a lot of Angular, NgRx too. Then I'm also developing some backend stuff with Java, or nowadays, or also with TypeScript, Node.js, and like I use these technologies in like when I'm doing consulting. But I'm also starting some like I'm doing indie hacking, like developing little products here and there, and that's also been a great inspiration for the book you already mentioned. And yeah, I'm doing blogging like since 2 years, mostly on Angular. I think I never really got away from Angular on the blogging part, and I'm also doing speaking, like different talks. I think they're all also on JavaScript until now. Gotta broaden the area there, but Angular's been a favorite topic of mine, and that's why I've done a whole book about like state management in Angular. That'll be about it, I think. Yeah.
Very nice. Do you find yourself gravitating towards front end stuff, or do you have like this desire to do kind of it all?
Kind of gravitating towards front end stuff, like what you see of me on the web, I guess. But like I like to do like the full stack development. It's kind of bad word nowadays, but I just like the idea of doing everything. Like you can develop a whole product by yourself, and nowadays it's so nice when you can do full stack development with one language. I just really enjoyed that. So recently I've developed a product in like 2 months with full stack TypeScript, and I just like the idea of that. But yeah, different projects, different technology, and recently it's been a lot of front end stuff which I really enjoy.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, I kind of in the same boat. I like doing all the things, right? But I really enjoy the front end part because of the visual aspect of taking logical programming and then being able to translate that and do something visual along with it and tie those two together. It's always been a draw of the front end part. Yeah. Very cool. Hey, I've got a question for you because I'm just out of curiosity. So you got this whiteboard behind you, right? And you have it in a vertical layout versus a horizontal. So I want to kind of get a poll from everybody who's on here. Like, is that like a developer mindset that you think in terms of like your code going vertical, so you want your whiteboard vertical? Because I think that's how I do too. I put my whiteboards vertical because maybe I'm into code and programming. What do you think?
My husband's whiteboard is vertical, is exactly like Nils. So that's I've never thought of.
Aren't they meant to be vertical? I don't know. Like pages are vertical, so you write from the top to the bottom.
I've
so I thought
only
that's just
ever
natural,
seen,
right?
outside of this conversation, I've only ever seen them like long ways, like teacher style, right? Like you're in a classroom. Yeah.
I have to give 2 answers. I actually prefer mine horizontal because I'm typically not writing out code. I'm more so writing out flows and diagrams to see how different pieces will fit together. So that's how I typically have oriented mine. But at the same time, my real answer is neither, only because the whiteboard that I have, which is technically a piece of glass, is square. So there is no correct or incorrect orientation.
I've got to admit, I fully expected you to say, I want mine diagonal.
Yeah, or
I
like rainbow shape.
Going diamond with my square one, but
like I only write in arches, like something weird.
So I've been using this one mostly, like you can see, for to-do lists. So it's like a cheap way of keeping to-do lists instead of having like numerous pieces of paper. And
so
like the second one would be for boxes.
Have you heard of Rocket Book?
Rocket Book.
My birthday was this week, and my
congratulations
got me a Rocket Book.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
You.
Happy birthday!
I used to think that all the Valentine's decorations was for me as a little kid because I have a birthday right after Valentine's. But Rocket Book is so cool, and it actually works with whiteboards too. I think they sell little like QR codes, and you scan it, and it's set up with an app so that it can go to like any destination, like your email, Dropbox, where it's got a ton of destinations. But you scan it, and then it either it turns into like a PDF or like a GIF, even of like a progressive thing, like if you have a list of notes and it's like growing. But it's really cool because they do whiteboards too, and so it's like categorizing and sending it out to the cloud. So I don't know, I'm excited. I'm trying it out, and I wanted to like shout out to that since we're talking about whiteboards and like you're saying like reusable, environmental friendly notes. So
yeah, and maybe that could help me set up some reminders, because I think most of these are actually ideas for blog posts or like talks, and then it could remind me to like do this and not just keep it on the whiteboard until I can't wipe it away anymore.
Those kind of ideas always come to me in bed. Never when I'm near a whiteboard, and I'm like, oh, that's a perfect one. I'm like writing it on my phone.
Have you not put a whiteboard?
Yours happened during the. What'd you say, Mike?
You can put a whiteboard next to your bed, or potentially here's an idea that just came to me. Get a larger one, and it could be your headboard for the bed. And this way, all you have to do is just.
Yeah. And then any guests that I have think I've absolutely lost it. They're just.
That wouldn't really work for me because I toss in my sleep, so I think my head would just erase all the ideas that were on the headboard. I don't know.
Oh God. Okay, sorry, we totally derailed, and I really want to hear about this book. So Nils,
should I take it away? Oh yeah,
yes, please.
Like I've prepared some slides on whiteboards now, so I think
nice.
No, just let's get into this.
Is your book offered in the whiteboard platform? Can we get it on whiteboard?
Yes, you can only actually get it on whiteboard. So I've handwritten it on a couple of whiteboards, and if you order it, you'll just get like 100 whiteboards delivered to your front step. Yeah,
excellent.
It's a very expensive book.
Yes, but it's I'd say it's worth it, but no.
You are literally my new favorite person, Nils. Oh, thank you for coming on. Okay, I'm excited. You tell us about the book.
All right. Can I share my screen somehow? I don't know. Yeah, I'm already sharing my screen. Go. Perfect. So I can bring this up. So just some facts about the book. So I've started with this indie hacking project, which maybe I can show some slides for that later. But it's basically a graphics editor in the browser, and I've started this one with a good friend of mine. And state management was really hard for this. So if you're developing your classic enterprise application, you don't have to think about it that much at first, I'd say. But when you're trying to implement a graphics tool in your browser, you got to think about state, because there's a lot of state in the browser. And so we naturally turn to NgRx. Like, we've tried it without it, but we needed something that had like an architecture for all of that. And that's why we turned to NgRx. And so we developed this product, and all of the learnings which I've got during this development went right into this book. Because during development, I've stumbled so many times, and I looked up so much stuff and watched so many videos, and like trial and error, figured so much stuff out that I thought, yeah, I gotta write this down somehow. And that's why the book came out. And because this is an open source project, and I really like the idea of open source. I thought I'd give a good bunch of this away for free, like back to the community. So during pre-sale, you could pay what you want for the book, and it's like, well, I think over 500 people ordered it in the pre-sale, and they could pay what they want, so anyone could get it. And still now, if you're a student or something, you can reach out to me, and we'll figure something out. And like it's 150 pages long, and I've self-published it, so I really wanted to have full control of it and get it ready when I'm ready, and so decided to self-publish it. And I reached out to NgRx team members. They reviewed it, so I've got really nice feedback on that one. And it has a bunch of links back to these background resources, which I've initially mentioned. So I think it's over 300 links, like 360 or something, to talks, to different blog posts, to like other technologies you might want to look at instead. So I really wanted to show what NgRx is good for, but also provide you like all the background information and all the little considerations you might want to look into before getting into the technology, or when you're already using it, how to think about it. And that's all in the book. So we could start off with the story about NgRx. Like you're developing with Angular, and you're thinking of using NgRx. So should I go ahead with that one?
Yeah, I just want to be clear beforehand that it's not just a technical book, because I know documentation exists and what have you, but the reasonings why and the overall thought process is always good to include. So thank you for not just focusing on the technical aspects.
Yeah, during writing this, I really thought of writing this for myself or a bunch of people I knew. And I've also put in these little boxes here and there with little smiley faces telling you, all right, this stuff might be a bit difficult, but you can go through this, like all the RxJS part. Like you've talked with Lamis on the last episode. It's really powerful, but it can get a bit heavy. And if you're already going through a learning phase there, it might be a bit much. So like I thought, like, I write this for myself, so I need some motivation here and there.
And all then, since it's a digital book, are all those links that you mentioned, they're all clickable from the book?
They're all clickable from the book.
Yeah, that's awesome. So while you're reading, you can go to the supplemental material.
Yeah, one more point on that one. It's also including a whole example application, like including every little section there. So every little aspect of the framework is implemented and explored in one chapter. And there's a little link with a live demo, which builds up continuously throughout the book. And that's like over 40 steps, I think. And you can like have them in stack blitz, like this perfect playground for Angular apps. And you can click around and explore it on your own. So it's really interactive. All right, so the basic idea for NgRx, so the basic story for coming towards NgRx, it's a bit different like in other frameworks, and here's actually why. So if you've got your regular Angular application, it might look like this from something I draw on my whiteboard, right? So it's this hierarchical component tree where you've got this this one component at the top, which could be your app component, and it has some local state right here, like some title you want to change for the top bar of your browser, right? And then you've got this child component, these child components below. So for different views inside your application, you've got different components in order to keep everything maintainable, right? And these all might have local state. They don't have to have it, but most components do. And sometimes you even want to share state between components. So on the left side, you see this this like parent component, which has some shared state, and it can actually share state to different child components through these little IO bindings here, right? So you've got Angular already comes with different tools for sharing state between different components. Like inside components, you can manage state through class variables, right? Properties, and you can even get them towards other components by binding them through inputs and outputs. So that's a really good measure to have, and it's really helpful in a lot of situations. So the usual story would start right here, and if you think about Redux or the React world, you'd usually just start right here and say, all right, if you've only got these input-output bindings, you have to turn towards Redux because it's hard to share some state like from all over here towards all over here. So with input-output bindings, you'd have to go all the way. You'd have to go through this parent, and you'd have to go through this one, and then down to this one, and you're finally ending up here, right? But with Angular, the story goes a bit different. So I really explored this in the beginning of when writing this book. What's the actual use case for NgRx? Like, it's still different to put this into words, but in Angular, you have this different aspect. You've already got services. So that's something you might not have in different front-end frameworks. You already got these injectable classes, which you can use outside of the component hierarchy. And this way you can have shared state, which is independent of the view setup. And this way we could share some state from here with a component over here without binding anything through these intermediate components, so that I don't have to like be concerned with any shared state that doesn't concern them directly. So this isn't really an argument for introducing NgRx to your application. You can work with this, right? And if you go on and you find yourself in a situation where it's hard to synchronize the component state with the shared state, you've also got a tool that's coming with Angular, and that's RxJS. So your service could not only have this shared state in some kind of property fields, but because if it's only in property fields, like, you can bind it properly to components. But if you want to introduce some intermediate steps, it's a bit hard because you don't really know when does the shared state get changed. What you usually do is you use RxJS. You introduce some kind of subject, behavior subject, or any kind of observable, because then you get this like this long-standing term here in software development. It's called command query responsibility segregation. Really hard to pronounce, I guess, at least for me. For short, it's CQRS, or just CQS. And the idea is that you segregate commands and queries. So the query would be the subscription to your observable. You'd query some specific kind of shared state, and your command would be invoking a method on your service. And this way you can you have this separation, and you get an explicit way to hook into when data changes. So your observable, you can pipe this through all these operators. Again, last episode really dove deep into this one. And on the other hand, you can issue commands to your service. Like if you've got this user service which has to update some users, you can query these users through some observable, like that would be the top arrow here. And if you want to update some user, you can issue a command to the service, and this one can in turn set off some HTTP call. And on the view side, you can easily translate these to some render call in the view, and you can like have some triggers for that. And it also gives you already performance benefits like the on-push change detection. All right. So we're still not kind of there, right? We still don't really see the need for NgRx. The problem is this thing. So I can maybe went a bit off rails here, but just to show the idea, I think there are probably projects that look like this in theory. So I don't know if this fits on my vertical whiteboard or still, but if you introduce all these kinds of services which share state, and if you got this command query responsibility segregation principle, then you can work with it. Like, it's something many people use in Angular projects to scale up their architecture to share state, and it works quite fine. So you'd have all these kinds of services, like the top one could be still our user service, and then we've got this authentication service, which is keeping the current user, and then we've got some domain data in here and some domain data in here. And usually all data we manage in an application is like codependent. If you change one piece, you probably gotta notify some other piece, and then you gotta issue another HTTP request, and it gets messy, especially with async tasks. So I've introduced these little circles here.
I know. I noticed the loop for async.
Yeah.
I thought that was nice.
Yeah. There's no real sign for that. Yeah. So you make this round trip again, and then you gotta see, all right, when this round trip is done, I gotta tell this service. It works fine. So, but as you see, it kind of gets messy. You kind of lose this bird eye perspective on your state. Your state gets like fragmented. It's all over the place. which isn't like totally a bad thing if you like. This is the first piece I've linked in the book. It's the actor model. So there's also some work on keeping this organized, but NgRx is kind of the solution currently to untangling this mess in Angular applications. It's not the only solution. That's where my point is. So how do we untangle this? We just say we don't have all these different services. We just have one. We don't have a couple services that share states. So we just have one that contains all the global states. So there's a difference there. We just say all this shared state is global state now. So it doesn't get entangled, and like it looks a lot cleaner right now. And we still have this segregation, right? Something changed here. We don't have commands anymore. We now have events, but we can still push data from the service to components through RxJS, like queries, subscriptions, right? And this way we can clean a lot of things up. And like one part of the idea of the last step of this idea, like the first step would be having services. The next step would be the segregation of command and query. And the last step is now, all right, we don't have these different actors. We just have one global state, which is kind of a workaround, but works really well for many people. And we've also replaced the commands with events. So instead of telling some service to do something explicitly, we rather say, all right, this happened. Maybe this needs to result in a state change, but the component doesn't really know. It doesn't force the state change. So the service has full control of it. And it's really nice for traceability purposes. So we've got this global state and this global event bus. Like that's also backend topic, if anyone's coming from that part, and makes things a lot easier.
So is this model not possible without NgRx?
It's definitely possible without NgRx, but probably what you would end up doing would be re-implementing NgRx, right? So this idea is what it isn't like a unique idea for NgRx. Still, many unique, great ideas went into that library, but the basic underlying principle would be Redux, right? So that's what the pattern is initially called Flux, and sometimes it's called Redux. But the big library in that space is Redux. But the underlying pattern actually emerged in many different ways. People working in different languages also arrived at this pattern because it made things so much more easier, because you have these two indirections. You split the command of changing state from querying state, and the next one would be that you generally do this little cop-out where you replace shared state with one global state and have this have components only report what's happening. And that's really something many people ended up. And I think the engineers at Firebase, like, correct me on this one, but I think this is how it went down. Like the engineers working at Google on Firebase, they saw themselves ending up at this pattern, and then they implemented NgRx basically. All right.
It also allows for centralization and organization of all your logic in one place as well. Definitely separate from how it's being presented.
Yeah, so that's something people always strive towards, I think, in Angular. So you have these different services where you just factor out all the state part, and then you have components separated from this. And this is like the next. I wouldn't say the next level. So it isn't like a natural progression. You don't need this either way. But like if you think back, if you're implementing a graphics editor on your in your browser, and it has to run everything has to run on the client side. You've got a lot of state, and it can change from a lot of different places. So all these components you see here, they can dispatch events, and you just want to have one place where you really say, all right, this would be the next state then.
Yeah, exactly. And then to Alyssa's point of, can you do this without NgRx? And that's more of can be brought up to like a higher level that, of course you can,
but the reason why you bring in libraries is that so you don't have to implement common logic around different things. So I always bring up the point of always think critically of the different dependencies that you're bringing in and figure out what need that library may be solving for you and your application.
Definitely. So in the book, once I'm done with this introduction, I'll mention these different libraries, which I can mention now. In the Angular space, I think what got really big recently is called Akita. Haven't tried this myself, but it looks really nice. And there you don't have this second interaction. Like you have predefined ways of managing state. Like Mike just said, it's something you always use and you want to have it implemented once nicely and just pull it in. But you don't have this indirection where you use events. So you don't have this global event bus. It makes things different. I was tempted to say easier there, but you're more coupled to the state management like you would be if you just have this event connection to the state. But if you don't really need this decoupling here, you might be better off with that one. Yeah.
I think that's one element that gets kind of the part that's still up in the air of a solution for, where you have something like you mentioned, which you have this decoupling of these events, right, that happen with NgRx, but to have a mental model or a confirmation of this flow happens in a certain way, right? It's because they're all independent, you get that power with it, but then you also have this challenge of like, how do I orchestrate a known structure, and then how do I mentally understand that? How can I conceptually grasp like what's going on throughout the application in terms of business logic? And so, yeah, but different tools, different things, right?
Tools might be a really good point here, because I think a lot of arguments in this discussion are based on what tools are available. So I think some patterns are just not that popular because the tooling around them isn't as good. And the tooling around Ngx or Redux is really nice because it's like the standardized pattern. You can say, you can always say everything is in the global state, and you know how the state changes. And this makes it easy to plug in stuff on top, like the Redux dev tools. You can use them with NgRx, and you have this little browser plugin where you can do what you just mentioned. You can follow this stream of what happened to my state. And it would be really nice if you could integrate this with other approaches. So this is currently a plus for NgRx, but yeah, I think there's still room going forward in this kind of solution space, yeah. So we could talk about how this is really implemented. So the idea is clear. I think we've got this global service where we store the state, and you can push events to this service, and then the state will somehow update. But how does it really update? This is like shown here. Now we've got these words which might be a bit intimidating at first, but I'll try to explain them in really simple terms here. So this global service, which has all this global state in it, that's what's called the Ngx Store, or it's also called Store in many other frameworks. So if you're coming from a different background, it's the same thing. It's this box where you have the current state. It contains the current global state, and this state doesn't change. So it's immutable. Just means you can't just change it right away, because that would break some of these principles we've seen before. You don't want to just mutate the state, because components should know when the state updates. So you just, if you think about RxJS, you wouldn't mutate the current state, you just push a new one through the observable. So the store at the same point is also an observable containing the current state. And every time a new state gets computed, it will push this new state to your component. So that's the update part over here. So that would be the query part of our command and query segregation, and the component can then dispatch events over here. And events are called actions in NgRx. I think that's just traditionally, because it's really good to have in mind that these are events. So they shouldn't be like commands. They shouldn't tell the store what to do. Instead, the store knows what to do, because it has this funnel, this reducer, which is just a function. It's just a function accepting 2 parameters, the current state and this event/action, right? And it doesn't mutate the state, but from this information it gets, like what's currently in the state and what has been dispatched from the component, like there could be some information in there, what happened in the application, like did someone click a button or did some HTTP request turn up with a result, that could be then incorporated into the next state, which we see down here. And the reducer is doing this not by mutating this state, but by computing a completely new state object. And the store will do this anytime an action comes into the store, and then it will push out this state through an underlying ArcGIS observable to any component that is subscribed to the store.
So the last time I really tried to get behind NgRx and really wrap my head around it and use it, everything that you just said, I was like, I got it. I'm cool. But then you've got the stuff, I'll say the E word, the effect on the outside of your box there. And that is where I was like, I give up on life. So that I'm really excited to see how you explain this next bit, because it's like the scariest part.
Thanks for the introduction to that part. I'll do my best now. So let's get to the stuff. So if you imagine this part on the right side gone at this point, it's already like the Redux principle. It's self-contained. The effects are just, it doesn't really belong to the store idea. It's actually also 2 separate packages in NGX for that reason, because you can use this principle already in your application. You don't have to introduce this one. The basic idea is just from somewhere actions can come into our store, and at that point the store will invoke the reducer, which we code ourselves. It's like this switch case statement where you say, all right, action types X, Y, Z, then compute the next state like this. So this is the whole NGX principle, and anything on top can just interface with what we have here. So if you want to say that some kind of asynchronous thing happened, you can tell it to the store by dispatching an action. You can't communicate any other way with the store. It's just by dispatching an action to the store, and then it will update the state. Nothing more there. And the thing is, inside the reducer, you can perform anything else than what I just mentioned. You can't run observables. You can't do anything asynchronously, because it has to be synchronously, and it can't reach outside of this box. Like it can't actually reach outside of this funnel. So it just has access to the state and the action. Now, this is hard because there's no way of doing an HTTP request now. Like we got to fetch some data from the backend. Most applications have to do this, right? And in order to do this, there's this other library which would be called Ngx Effects, and it's this formalization over performing asynchronous stuff in conjunction with NGX, like the store part. And what it does is it grabs any action after it went through the reducer, funnels it through some effect, and this effect can be asynchronous. It's not inside the reducer, it's not even in the store. It can go fetch something from the backend, maybe through some service, and this one, again, does the actual HTTP call or whatever you want to do asynchronously. And once that's done, you just dispatch an action. And that's the whole effect part. And the way you write this would be with plain ArcGIS. So you have the observable where you start with a stream of different actions that come into your store. Actually, this observable will only put out the actions once they went through the store, so you can be sure that the state is already updated. And then you can do whatever you want based on that action. Like if the action says load something from the backend, like load our users, it can go off, load these users, and once it's done, it can communicate back to the store in form of a dispatched action. And you describe this with this observable. You base it off of the stream of all actions. You like switch map, merge map it over to some HTTP call. And once that gets back, you'll map back to another action. And NGX will subscribe to this observable for you and funnel all actions that come out of it back to the store. And that's how we get this round trip, right? an action triggers some effect, you say, all right, actions of this type, like local users, will trigger this effect. It will go off to the service. The service will go off to some place to fetch the users. It'll go back, and then it will be dispatched a new action like load user success, usually back to the store, and we're done. Nothing changed actually over in the store part. It's just a formalization for subscribing to existing actions, doing some asynchronous stuff, and funneling that back without touching any of this. Did that make the cut?
No, it was beautiful. Like it was beautiful.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're describing it this way and presenting it this way, because I think that this is something that I see a lot as people are going through and trying to figure this stuff out in the state management and things like that. Is like, I think there's a lot of impression that people think that the effects are part of this bundle and we have to have it in it, and it's part of the thing. If we're doing global state, then effects are part of the equation, but they're a utility, right? And like you called out, the stuff on the left and the middle, that's about the state and the global state and the redux in that pattern, right? And like Hans in our comments, in our chat comments mentioned, effects are really when you leave the flux flow and run a server request and come back into the flux flow, right? So you think about all these things, like just like you described, the left and the middle is all about our state management, and the right is just a utility to help us broker something. Whether you do effects, whether you have some other solution that does that, maybe it's a combination of both. Ultimately, it's another way to kind of get stuff in and broker things to your state.
Yeah, so that's what we found so nice about this approach, because everything on the left or in the middle, like whatever you want to call it, stays so untouched. The ideas stay untouched, and we can still reap all the benefits, but we can also do HTTP requests somewhere else. So for our graphics tool, it was really nice to have this one source of truth, this one place where we knew, all right, this is the state for our current canvas, like our current tooling. Every different component can subscribe to that, and it will always show the right state. And we can trace every change to the state. This is something that allows you to use these nice dev tools you can install in your browser. Or what we did was we developed an undo redo feature. Like you want to press Control Z and undo something. That's something you need in any kind of sophisticated tool nowadays, because people expect it. And if you have this always these different parts of state available, you can go back and forth through each of them. And this is all thanks to this formalization, the idea of having reducers that don't mutate the state but always produce a new one. Yeah.
I'm loving this explanation, and the chat is only adding to it. And Mike even has alternate names for effect and reducer, and I think that's an idea. Maybe an additional library on top to just change those names right out. Like
it's just more commonly used English names. That's all, rather than specific names that fit directly into the pattern. I think that helps people understand the concept more. If you think of the relationship between dispatch and an action, dispatch is a messenger and the action is a message. The reducer is just something that does changes, so changer. And effect is kind of functions like if this then that. So hey, something happened. Oh yeah, I can go do something for you. I'll let you know. You can do something with that, and then the state is just a way to store data, so it's a database. I don't know.
Yeah,
just explain things in different words rather than say, come on, it's just an action. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's just a message that, hey, I want you to do something, and this is the thing I want you to do, and here's the things that you need to be able to do that.
Yeah, really good counterpart names, I'd say. That brings me to the point that these pieces are mostly really basic JavaScript, like what you just said, what is an action? And it's just a plain old JavaScript object. It's just something it has a property that tells it what kind of action it is, and then you can attach some plain JavaScript properties to that. And a reducer function is just a plain function, and the state is also just a plain JavaScript objects. So no magic there, no classes there. It's actually really crucial in order to gain some benefits. Like I've written a couple of blog posts on that. If you want to know why it's crucial to keep this one and this one always plain, and how to do this if you're coming from this. Like in Angular, you're usually using classes for a lot of the building blocks, like components are classes, services are classes. But when you're dealing with NgRx, we get in this like functional programming part, and you don't want to have classes for a couple of reasons. Like classes are fine for probably a couple of use cases, but at that point, it's really beneficial to have these all plain objects and plain functions.
And just thinking more about like an action, what an action actually is. If you think about it, it's a function, just in a different format, because functions have names, and that's essentially the action name that you're trying to do. And then the props that you're supplying are just parameters to that function.
Yeah. Plus, you don't really know what the function does. So yeah, it could do anything. All right. Yeah.
It's almost like an abstract function in that it has no implementation. It's just, hey, this is the thing that I want you to do, and these are the things that you need to be able to do it.
So I'm not really seeing what the next slide is right now. So I gotta do this on the fly. So this one showed up next.
What showed up next? I
think it fits nicely, because you can see that you drop all these actions from all these different places. Like you click somewhere, or your network returned this response in form of an action, and everything goes into the store. And every time it comes in, the store will spit out this new state in a little factory. Yeah, database factory. All right. Again, this is like just the focus part on the reducer, and yeah, let me check what's next up. Yeah, you can combine a bunch of these. Like this might be a bit. It's something you need in any application, so I might as well get into it. Like if your application goes bigger, you've got this part for the users now, and you might want to have different parts of your state. Like your application grows, and you've got this part for users, you've got this part for managing settings, and you don't want to combine all of this into one global state, because that's a question I encountered a couple of times. Like, how do you get another NGX store? I want to manage some different data. How can I like do this? The point is, you always have just one store, but you can have a bunch of reducers, and you can have a bunch of actions, and you can have just this one piece, just this one state object, but you can like have different slices of it. And this is what this illustration is showing here. So what you do is you'd have this big box of state, and in there, like this triangle could represent your user state, and this might be your authentication state. These might be some builds that belong to some user over here. And you want to manage them all differently. Like when the state updates, there's a reducer for every part of this. And when any action comes in here, you actually have this really big reducer, but it consists of different smaller reducers. And each one of them will get its specific slice of state. It'll get the whole action. And whether it wants to do something with that or not, that's the part where it's a bit different from a function. Maybe like this reducer won't do anything with this action if it's about doing something to any bills or something, or the authentication state, because it's just about the users, the triangle users, right? And this one will produce a new triangle state, and the other ones might just keep the original one. Can't see this here, but they might create a new one, or just update, leave it as it is. And then the store will combine them back into this whole new next state part. And this way you can grow your application and really have it separated. And you can also work with a couple of people on the same Angular application, because it's all following the same pattern.
If you keep the analogy of a database, this is almost like tables in your database, right? And you the different features are different tables, and then you use the aggregate of all that data together. It makes up your entire database or your state.
Yeah, really good analogy. Let me just have a quick look what's up next, so I don't just wing them all the way. Okay, we've got this setup. We know the pattern, and now we want to access something from the store. So we know that there's some point where we put actions towards the store, we dispatch them. We've maybe defined this, how the state looks. In TypeScript, we can do this really well with interfaces or type definitions. We do this at some point, we define some actions, and we'll maybe implement some reducer functions that will produce these new states. Just maybe a quick point on that one. You can do it, like that's something maybe people in the Angular one aren't too used to. If you're using these kind of behavior subject services, you might have already done it, but like when I first got into functional programming and I came from this class background, I always thought, how do I create new objects? Like if it gets really big, I don't want to like do a deep copy. That's bad, and I don't want to iterate through all the properties and create a new object. That sounds really like a big task just for managing my state. So what you do is to use these the spread operator. That we've got for a couple of years now, and you just do a shallow copy of everything that's already in the state, and then in this new object you've now created that has all the properties from before, you override the ones you want to change. So if you've loaded the users from the backend, you'll just copy the whole state using the spread operator, like these 3 dots, put them inside a new object declaration, and then you put your new state on top, and then you can spit out the new state just as easily. There are even easier ways, also covered in the book, like this library Imma.js, just if that's also a bit like intimidating when you get into Ngx. These functional programming concepts are pretty nicely done nowadays in JavaScript. All right. And
I think one of the nice things about this whole pattern and everything is like, to this point that you're bringing up, is that there's this concept of you have to kind of think about mutability and not mutating your state and things like that. But because it's isolated in the spot, you can kind of work that over time or figure that out and know that like that doesn't carry over to your components per se in terms of you solving that problem. So whether you're like, I want to implement Immer now, or I want to solve that, I'd go dive into the reducer part and solve that there, and everything else just remains the same because we don't have that code spread out in places. So we're really isolating where we do logic and pieces, which makes it great for building over time.
Yeah, and also for testability, which just occurred to me. So if you've got this function where you can throw in a piece of state and a new state comes out, you can throw something in that represents an action that could be coming from anywhere, and you can assert this output of the reducer, and you'll be fine. That part will be tested, and you can be sure that it always will work just the same way, just because of these different concepts in place. All right, I think we've got actions now. We've got the state definition, how you can bring these together with some different reducers in order to scale things up and always put out a new state. And we've slightly covered effects. I've got a slide for that too later. But what we didn't do yet would be like showing that state to some component. How do we get anything out of the store? I've already mentioned you'd query this, and it's just again, sorry for the just. I know that RxJS observables are a bit hard to wrap your head around at the beginning, so excuse that part. But what you will do is you subscribe to this whole store, but in most places you don't want to look at the whole store. So you don't want to look at all users. You just want to look at the currently logged in one in order to display it, like in the top right corner, like you're the logged in user and your name is like this, right? So you want to just have one property of the whole state. And in order to keep this performant and reusable, RxJS is really on your side, and Ngx is also has really nice tooling for this in form of selectors. Another term, Mike, maybe you've got another nice counterpart to this one. It's really a function that accepts the whole state and spits out this smaller part of it on the right side, and you can write it out whatever way you want.
So I'll chime in with one because when I look at this whole idea of NgRx and taking a step back at what they are at a conceptual level, again, stepping away from the terms, the state, as I said, is very much so like a database. And if that paradigm actually carries out more so with other things, but a property selector would be in database terms an equivalent to either a view or just a select query. But a view, I think, encapsulates that. The similarity is a little bit better.
I was going to say that if you weren't going to say that, I was about to unmute and say the same thing. Yeah, for that analogy, I think it works. You know, for people coming from a database standpoint and that knowledge, like how do you wrap your head around this? I think that's a good analogy for thinking about that. Is that is a view that you're saying like, I want to use this reusable selector or view to have the data, and under the hood with RxJS, it'll ensure that like the right active current value is always coming through there. But we can just say like, give me this view.
Yeah, view would be really perfect because what we can use it for is actually building up view models. So to have some more benefits of NGX, it really helps to keep the store or your database normalized, something you'd probably also do if you're developing an SQL database or something like that. And but you don't want to display your state mostly just how it's in the store. So it could be a bit optimized in there, so you don't have any like redundancies or something like that. And people scratch that. You can use these selectors to build up view models from this normalized state. And this way you can even more decouple your actual state. This can be optimized and non-redundant, but you can build up view models to the selectors, and they give you a view which continuously updates because it's an RxJS observable. And you always get the newest view model for your component. You can bind that through the async pipe. You can subscribe in your component. That's up to you. And then you can even put on the on-push change detection method from Angular. So that's something you get right on top there. And this is the simpler case, but you can do even more stuff. Like if you want to build up these view models, you can use something that's called computed selectors. So you have these property selectors that will like fetch some part of the state. Like let's say this one is again the users, and like this block over here would be the authentication state. And now you want to display the currently logged in user on the top right frame, right? And you have these different selectors. You have one for fetching the triangle. You have one for fetching the tilted square over here. And then you want to combine them in order to have this view model, which would be just one selector, maybe one user, maybe, which you fetch based on who's currently logged in. And you can do so with computed selectors. Like you could do this in a component. You can subscribe to both of them or and combine them. Again, there's probably an RxJS operator perfect for that. But if you use these computed selectors, you can provide another function. It's called like a projector. It's something you'd have in like any map call, or you can put on arrays or RxJS streams, and it will give you both of the current state of both selectors, like the property ones, and you can combine them in ever which way you want. Just make sure you don't use anything outside of that, and then it will give you like what you build out of it, the view model. And what NGX will do for these computed selectors is it will always look at whether these properties changed. So when they didn't change, it won't run this one again. And this way you can have really optimized views, because your view models will only really update, and this way your views will only re-render when really something to the state changed. So this might be a concern if you've got everything in the global state, so you'd have to update your views every time something changes, even if it is unrelated to what you're actually displaying. But if you use these computed selectors, you get this memorized view model. It's like, this is just the concept of, all right, did anything change that I put in? If it didn't, I don't have to run this again, and I just get the output. So you're basically trading storage for computation power, right? I'll say, just save this somewhere, the result, and if it's the same input from the last time, it'll be the same output.
Another great thing about that is, again, kind of everything is that it isolates the behavior and the logic in a certain spot, right? So like when we talk about this computed selector, you could think in terms of like the component just cares about what came out of it, right? So now your component's like, okay, I'm ready to render this house on the right, right? But let's say over time, it's like to build that computed thing, now we need a third slice in order to evaluate something to figure it out. Well, we update our selector, we never have to go into our component to make any changes at that point because we pulled that logic out of the component, right, and put it into the selector. Now we have this ability to adapt and change and meet, logic need changes without disrupting or big changes to our components. Because when you talk about the store in the very beginning, and you allude to the fact that like then this thing can be used in multiple components across the component tree. So now you're like, I don't want each component to have to be the one that wires these two together. If they all use the same selector, now they all benefit from the logic change, right?
Definitely. And if you think back to the beginning and again to this, I've named the picture, I think the file, I've named it service soup. So this like messy part where every service collided with each other. If you want to introduce the like third part of the state, it would usually be like in another service, and so you'd have again like just one more arrow you'd have to draw on your whiteboard between two different services, and everything would get even more messy. And here you'd basically adjust your selector to include one more property, and you're done. Your view model stays the same. Component doesn't care. All right, we've got selectors. Maybe we can go back to effects for the last part here. If I find the slide again, it's the next one. Perfect.
Oh, you mean database triggers? Oh, sorry.
Oh, database triggers. Yeah, we can introduce more names here. So there's this little circle again for the async HTTP request. We've got these actions which are messages which or functions, whatever you want to call them, like little events. I think the event metaphor is really nice. There's a nice talk by Mike Ryan, co-creator of NGX, really emphasizing the idea of referring to actions as events. So because this helps you in maintaining everything, because if you really name it like what should be happening based on that, it's really hard to add additional stuff later on. But if you just say what happened, it's really nice to layer effects on that and maybe catch the action in one more reducer, which is something you might as well really, it happens later on that you say, right, now I need this in a different part, and you don't have to change anything else, just catch this action as well, and you're done. And if we start out with one action, we've got this stream, which you get from the NgRx Effects package, which will, like I've said, emit any action that runs through the store. So once it's done changing the state, the new state is emitted. It'll go through your observable, and you might have defined your effect, and this is what it looks like on a conceptual level. And based off of this submit action, you might go out and switch map, merge map, concat map, whatever makes sense at that point. Usually it's merge map. So if we say we'll update a user, we want every action to have an effect on the backend, no matter at what point it's starting or at what point it's done doing this HTTP request. So just this little circle, something that goes on in the background, doesn't concern the actual store. Once it's done updating our actual database in the backend, which we're just mimicking on the client side here, we've got these callback functions from any observable, like on next, like the first one you pass to subscribe, or on arrow, the second one you pass to subscribe. You don't really have to subscribe when you're defining the effect. That will be done by NgRx for you, but you can tell NgRx what's in the stream once this one is done through like RxJS map or catch error. And you can return these different actions at that point. You'll create new actions in order to have new events, in order to communicate what happened with this HTTP request. And this submit success might contain a reference to the user that was updated, and at that point you can update it in the store. If you're doing like pessimistically, if you're approaching it pessimistically, you say, all right, I'll only want to display changes which are already persisted to your database. Then you can use this to update your state at that point. Or if you already updated the state at that point, you might want to emit a submit failure if it didn't happen, and then you can roll it back. like you can undo the changes from before and say, right, just set this user like it was before because I couldn't persist to the database. Yeah, that's the basic concept of effects right there. Yeah, and what you can do based off these is a bunch of more stuff. Like I've explored these different patterns in the book. Like I won't really go too deep into these, but you can start out by having different container and presentational components. That's something you always have in Angular, and you can really connect this good to NgRx, but it's a bit separated from this. But I explored it in combination where you only select from the store in container components, and then you have these reusable presentational components. And this way you don't really couple all your application to NgRx, and then you can like swap it out, or you don't have to use NgRx in all of the places. These kind of considerations. And the next one, like, excuse me for going through this so quick, but I think we can just have a glance. And you can also introduce facets, which is something that's been around. I'll argue a bit against it in the book, but it's something I'd like to mention, where you don't really have components connected to the store, but you introduce these facets in the middle, which I'm personally not a big fan of. I think it's a bit too much to go into this in detail here, but basically, I think this one is enough. If you really want to have these two indirections, it undoes a bit of what you get from the actual store. So forgive me if this is a bit out of reach right now, out of scope.
No worries. Totally another episode content for sure. And we've had some discussion we've had an episode on facades too. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that really helped us develop this graphics editor. Maybe I can just give you a quick idea of how that can look in the end. Like something like this. It's a mockup tool where you can drag your mockups of your applications, websites, whatever, into devices, and it will update like these mockup elements with your imagery. And everything you've seen there, you see everything that's in the middle is represented by the hold state in NgRx. There's a hold state slice just representing this this whole canvas hierarchy, this view hierarchy. And inside of these mockup elements, you've got the whole thing again, which you have all these stuff has to be kept in sync. You've got all these different events where you can drag stuff around. You can drag stuff over other elements, and then you've got these different components on the right. So there's a lot going on. You've got a lot of places where events can come from. And it really helps to have this architecture that we explored in the beginning. So that's something I want to emphasize again. If you're building something like this, you might want to take a look at NgRx.
Very cool.
There's a red AirPod.
Yeah, you can recolor them in the application. So this one is originally white.
This was an incredible walkthrough for me personally for NgRx. So I just wanted to thank you so much, Nils, for doing this. It was awesome. And I just think it was such a cool preview of your book. So I'm excited to go and get a copy. And I just feel very humbled to be a part of this walkthrough. So thank you, Nils.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. Great. All right, well, let's wrap things up. I guess we're at the top of the hour. So, but before we do picks, any last thing, Nils, in terms of the book and everything?
Well, I've put up the slide again. You can find the book at the URL listed there, gum.co/angular-ngx-book. You can read my blog. I've got a blog post which might really be interesting for people getting into the concepts where I re-implement the whole Ngx Store plus effects in a couple of lines. Like I think it's 20 lines. And if you know Angular and a bit RxJS, you can really see that there's no magic. And I think this one's really helpful.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to leave this slide up here real quick while I check if our panelists have any picks. No picks today. All right. All right. That works. All right. So we're all going to pick the book.
Hey, how about that? Justin, you never get asked. Do you have any picks there, buddy?
No,
No. Okay.
I'm siding with our panelists today. Thanks, though. But, yeah, picking the book. So for sure. All right.
And thanks
Nils.
for chat. Chat was fun today.
Yeah,
That
chat
good.
was awesome. Chat had some great comments and good inspiration for sure. But Nils, thanks a ton. Alyssa put it very well. We really appreciate you coming on, taking your time to share this content with us and present it to us, and also for writing this book and all of this great stuff. Thank you very much.
Anytime, my pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
For sure. All right, that's a wrap, everyone. Have a good one. Catch you next time.
Bye.